get ready to hear the whole unadulterated story. Right, Bill? We're going to hear it all today?
Unadulterated. That's
Okay,
it.
that's good.
First off, let me just say this house, I've been by it 1,000 times in my life. I was one of those little kids. I want to see inside of that house. That house is incredible. I got in.
I'm glad you're here.
It took me 63 years, but I got in.
I've seen you before on our street. Once in a while, you come by on different parades and things. But so we're here on Clinton Avenue in one of those old 1888 Victorians. And
who was the original owner?
The original owner, wow, that's good. Isabel Nash was the builder of this house, and her husband was a real estate developer. And this was all onion fields at one time. And
like Southport.
Yeah, and so they had to make a silk stocking area for all these new innovators, all of P.T. Barnum's friends.
Yeah.
And so they used to live here. And so now we're trying to keep it
I read
going.
somewhere that the first color photographs in a magazine were Scientific American, and they were color plates of the houses in this neighborhood, the multi-chromatic schemes.
And I have a picture downstairs.
Oh, my God.
I'll show it to you on the way
The
out.
history in this area just oozes, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah.
It's very cool. And you may remember Bill Finch or William. What's your middle initial?
Andrew. That was actually the name I was born under. Andrew. Yeah.
So you're William Andrew Finch or
Yes.
Andrew William Finch?
William Andrew Finch.
Oh, okay.
I registered to vote as Bill Finch because, that was easier to remember.
That's cool. And I know that you have kids that are have cool names to them. One of them after the book To Kill a Mockingbird, right?
Yeah. Peter William, Christopher Andrew, Atticus Cole, and Aiden Clark.
That's cool.
All have the last name of Finch.
And you are currently the executive director of the Discovery Museum, and you're serving as a climate fellow at the Rockefeller Institute of Government. So let's start by thanking Bill for being on our show today. And Bill, tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of what you believe in.
Well, I certainly believe in science, and I believe in nature and understanding where we are in the universe and trying to live in harmony with that rather than, the conquest mentality that mankind has had in America, especially for so long, where, the biodiversity has suffered, the topsoil has suffered, the air has suffered, and now our climate is in question as to whether or not humanity can survive much longer because human beings can only tolerate a certain temperature, and we're cooking the planet to a point where, pretty sanguine and conservative scientists are worried about the survivability of our species. Now, me and many others have been screaming about it. Thanks to Greta Thunberg now, the youth are energized and they're behind this. But I believe in science, and I believe in trying to live in harmony with the natural systems that we have.
Where did it start for you? When does your recollection of your interest in the environment?
Well, first off, it started because I'm really cheap, and my mother was really cheap, and we conserved things.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
We never got hot
What
water.
nationality was your mom?
German and Irish.
Okay.
Yeah. And my dad was kind of a mutt. They're not my biological parents. I did my ancestry, and I am 91% Welsh Irish. So
Okay.
you look in the mirror, you can sort of figure that out.
All right.
But I remember my earliest memories of being conservative were that we would get cold lunch. My parents didn't have a lot of money, so it was always they packed lunch. You couldn't afford hot lunch. But it was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, an apple, potato chips, basically that was it.
Here in Connecticut, you were raised.
Yeah, right in Black Rock.
Black Rock.
Near Bullards. And then Trumbull later on up on Daniels Farm Road. And we would be instructed and do it as a matter of habit. You would naturally fold up that brown paper bag and use it. And I had my jeans had a square on the back of my butt, which wore out sooner because I always had a folded up brown paper bag in there. They thought it was my wallet. No, it was reuse that bag till it falls apart.
Wow.
And we just, we didn't have a lot of money, but we made things stretch. And it gives you a good feeling because you're not wasting. Wasting really bothers me. I mean, when I was mayor and state senator, I'm a pretty progressive thinker. I just can't stand to see things wasted. So I try not to waste anything. And I think if we all do more of that,
When did you make the connection between
the first Earth
waste
Day?
and Earth?
Well, I was 8 when Kennedy was assassinated, and my family's Irish Catholic, as we mentioned, and my grandmother had 3 pictures. She raised 6 kids in 4 rooms. Now, we think that's terrible, no central heat, but that's how many of our families lived, right, Frank?
Yeah.
I mean, that was not unusual. We went to Nanny's house on Sunday, and there was like 20 people in the living room, and you're huddled around, a television and a gas-on gas heater, because a lot of the apartments didn't have central heat. But my grandmother had 3 pictures, and I was in catechism at St. Anne's trying to figure out this whole Holy Trinity thing, the Father, the Son. One guy's a ghost. I mean, what is it all? I'm like 6 or 7 years old. What? How does a ghost get inside you? I mean, what the? It was really confusing. But my nanny had 3 pictures in the kitchen. One was the Sacred Heart of Jesus, right?
Yeah.
Every grandmother had that, right? Then she had JFK and Ted Williams. So I thought that was
Williams.
the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. That was my Trinity. I actually had a chance to tell that story to
Which one was Ted Williams?
I think he was probably the
son?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had the chance to share that story with Caroline Kennedy, and she got a kick out of that.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
And when did you learn, if ever, about your biological parents?
Well, that was kind of a long journey. It started out when my first son, Peter, was born, and I'd take him to the doctor, and they'd say, well, what's your family background? And I never really thought about it before, because my family was my family. I was 4 months old when Marge and Bill got me, and that was my mother and father as far as I was concerned, and never really thought differently about that. But in terms of your ancestry, your heredity, your biological and medicinal needs, it's really unfair what we do. Like, I always put it to people like this way. So when I was about 10, my parents told me, but the thing about adoption that's really made me think on a much deeper level is, and I demonstrated it this way to some friends of mine who had doubts about giving people their original birth certificates, because it's a big issue now. It used to be that every state would allow you to get your birth certificate when you turned 18. You're an adult. We've taken your identity from you, and we're going to return it to you when you're 18. I personally don't think you ever have a right to take a person's identity from them, but the deal with adoption is we'll give it back to you when you're 18. Okay, but most states did away with that. All states but Kansas, actually. So now, since then, about 9 states have returned your ability to get your birth certificate, if you so desire, when you turn 18. But think about this. If I were to propose a law now that said to any parent, you may now go erase the identity of your child and give them a phony identity. What? How ridiculous is that? Oh, but you can if they're a helpless baby on their back,
right,
and they don't have the right to give consent. You can do it for them? So it's obviously absurd to take anyone's identity. But we have all these sort of Victorian mores about sex and reproduction, and people think, well, you were born out of wedlock. Well, I hope that people had a great time conceiving me.
Right.
And I'm here now, so get over yourself, right? I'm an individual just like you, and I should not have any less rights than anyone else. So adoptees are really one of the last, we've restored a lot of civil rights to a lot of groups, but we have not restored civil rights to adoptees.
Not yet.
No. In Connecticut, still from 83 on, you can get your original birth certificate if you were born after 83. But if you're born before 1983, you were basically you can't get your original identity.
What did you learn about the circumstances of your birth?
I did.
That you're willing to share with us.
I did talk to my birth mother twice, and found out that she, got pregnant when she was 21, I believe it was not married, was in an Irish Catholic family, and you weren't going to embarrass the family in those days and have a child out of wedlock. So she was sent away, as they all were.
Yep.
She was sent to a convent in New York City, and she did not have a good experience. A lot of resentment, a lot of the women were treated like dogs, like you're less than human.
So you actually have sympathy for what she went through.
I do, and the interesting thing is, I've met a half sister and a half brother, and I have another half brother in Texas and another half sister in Farmington, I believe she lives. I haven't spoken to those two, but I did spend some really good time with Diane, who's a sister of mine, lives up on Lake Winnipesaukee, beautiful, beautiful place. And her husband is a builder, and she cleans houses, and they have a great life up there.
That's great.
Yeah. And it was the first person I saw that looked like me, other than my boys,
wow,
who have some resemblance, thank God. At least I know they're mine.
Yeah, right. That's better than the alternative.
Yeah,
yes.
right. And it's funny because my siblings are disappointed with our mother, our birth mother, and I say that because as much as I'd love to meet her and get to know her a little bit, she'll never be my mother. A mother is the person who raises you, and we see that in Bridgeport with the creative family arrangements all the time, right? Who's your mother? Well, this is my mother, and maybe they're not the person who gave birth to you, but they're the mother who's raised you. And a lot of grandmothers are mothers.
Doesn't that make them extra special people?
Well, my parents always used to tell me, we picked you. The other kids came by accident. Yeah, it's a feeling that really kind of centers you in a way that, I'm not a really introspective person, but this has forced me to be introspective in a way. And I've learned a lot. And I never got my Irish up about, I get my Irish up about environmental issues, as you know. But, I lived through the civil rights period of time as you did, and we all believed in that, but it never really directly impacted me. Like, I had all my rights. I was a white male. I had everything, right? But in this case, there are people who are white males who are discriminated against. And you feel discriminated against, I think it doesn't matter for what reason, whether it's religion or skin color or sexual orientation or the fact that you had your identity stripped away. It's still wrong. And I think you can learn from each other that way.
And what was it like for you, if you could put us in the brain of a child, a 10-year-old, what did they do? Did they sit you down? What was that?
They tried telling me a couple times, and I was rebellious. I didn't want to hear it. I want to be like everybody else. I'm not different. I'm the same as you, Frank, And so
I'm talking about when your parents told you.
Yeah, no, I didn't want to be different.
I want to be like the family.
Yeah, like everybody else. I didn't want to have,
Oh, I see.
Because, I can remember there was still a stigma. I was at Black Rock School, and I remember I must have pulled a girl's ponytail or something on the playground, and then I got sat down for discipline, and I was probably 6, And I can remember the 2 teachers saying something like, well, that's because he's adopted. He acts like that. And I was like, what? What does that mean? I don't understand that. So then I think that was sort of planted in my mind that somehow you're bad if you're adopted, And so when my parents told me, I was like, I don't want to hear this. I'm just as good as everybody else. But, I'm a little thick. It got through my head. And I started.
But you don't remember being, affected by it in any way?
No.
Or traumatized to hear it?
No. I was, I think, like you said, it's special. I really do think parents probably favor the adopted child more than the natural-born child in a certain way sometimes, because it's a special way you get a child.
That's true.
And the interesting thing was my mother, God rest her soul, she passed away a couple of years ago. She always wanted to meet Anne Marie, my birth mother, and just say thank you. Most days I was happy that I got him.
Right.
Not every day, most days.
And so later on, tell me about Earth Day.
Well, the first Earth Day.
Well, first tell me about your dad. You always spoke so highly of him, about being a veteran, and I was always touched by your feelings for him. What makes you feel that way?
It's amazing. When I met my half-brother and he came down, we had pizza. My parents used to live right next door to me, across the driveway, and on Crown Street up by Bearsley Park. Similar neighborhood. You just don't have Bearsley Park.
Right, we sure don't. That is a great thing.
So Matt, my half-brother, came down, and he said, you know what, Bill, you made out better off. Your family was better than mine. And I was really moved by that because they had some troubles growing up. I don't know if it was the scars, that that their mother had, because she was so mistreated. And the interesting, I started to tell you about, my half-sister. She was disappointed in our birth mother for not wanting to meet me, and so was Matt. And they kind of felt like, you really ought to meet him, Anne-Marie, and she I know why she doesn't. It just brings up terrible, terrible memories of the way she was treated. And so I was sort of defending her for not wanting to meet me, even though I really wanted to meet her, because I kind of understood. I did a lot of reading about, what they did to women back then. It was just horrible.
Yeah.
And interestingly, when I was a senator, I had pursued my search through Catholic Charities, and it didn't reveal anything. That's a whole other story. But I had been approached by women who had given up their children for adoption. Now, think about this. you give birth to a baby, you sign your rights away as the mother, you never see that child again. If it's a closed adoption, you have no idea what happened to them. What a cruel fate to do to a woman who goes through with the pregnancy and gives this child up for adoption, and then you're going to be in prison for the rest of your life because you were dirty and no good and had this child out of wedlock, and we're never going to let you know what happened to your child. That's cruel and unusual punishment. I don't know how you could do that to somebody, but they did it to women all the time. I never knew that, and they came to me and told me their stories. And then the urban legend is, oh, women give up children for adoption. They never want to know. No, most women are dying to find out what happened to their child. There are some that don't, like my birth mother, and you can explain that because of the way they were treated and the trauma they went through. They don't want to revisit that. Understandable, right? I don't think it's right. I should be able to, but, life's not always fair. But it just seems to me that we have a learning curve that we're back on. We regressed. We took people's rights away. And the real people that suffer, like adoptees never should have their identity for a moment taken away. But putting that aside, think about the women and what the impact is on the women. So when they came to me, that was my impetus to try to change this. And both of my parents wanted to meet my biological mother. Biological father is kind of in dispute.
It's a different circumstance.
Yeah. So, but
how about your dad?
He was an amazing guy. We talked about my nanny and how she raised all those kids in 4 rooms. And I think that was sort of the basis for our conservatism with natural resources. Nobody had a lot, like somebody got a car or a television.
What street were you on?
We lived on Fox and they lived on Wilson.
Okay.
So everybody was sort of right
there.
Right there, and it was I was really lucky. I'll show you some pictures of the Finch family still get together at Port 5, and there's more people. I don't even know half their names.
Your dad was in the Navy?
So there were 5 boys, and they all were in the military. And his brother Bob was fighting in Europe, and he wrote him. He was in the Army. He says, Billy, don't go in the Army. He said, you have to sleep in a tent. You got to eat out of a can. We're shooting in trenches. It's foxholes. We're freezing. It's terrible. Go in the Navy. You're a good swimmer. They feed you 3 times a day, and it's warm, right? You'll be better off. So his first assignment was D-Day, and the ship was sunk. So
oh my God!
Great advice.
D-Day, huh?
So listen to this. Okay, this guy is 17, leaves high school, joins the military, and you know why I really get angry about the Electoral College? It's not all the hocus pocus. But my dad told me when I was little, I said, Daddy, why did you fight in the war? He said, so you could vote. And when you have an electoral college, as soon as somebody wins 50% plus 1, all the other votes are thrown away. My dad risked his life for my vote to count. I don't care whether you vote Democrat or Republican. How could you not count the votes? The electoral college throws half the votes away. You can't do that. And then my Republican buddies will say, well, yeah, it's because you guys lost on those 2 contested elections, Gore and Lieberman and Bush. And no, I don't care who wins as much as count every vote. Count every vote. That's all. And then let the chips fall where they may. So my dad goes off to war so that I can vote. And it was an incredible experience for a man 17 years old. 17, 18, he's at D-Day.
What kind of boat was he in?
He was on a little tin can, the Destroyer Escort.
Destroyer.
Yeah, and so these things, when we built Cakewalk, the boat over here at Director Shipyard, it was 300 feet long. Do you know how long his destroyer was with 220 men on it? 290 feet long. That Cakewalk was bigger than where all those men were. So what happened was they injured their rudder, and they were going in a circle. They were the lead, the Fitch, not Finch, but the Fitch and the Cory, C-O-R-R-Y, were the 2 lead destroyers for this giant armada going into Utah Beach. And the ship was injured, and it was going in a very tight circle, and the Nazi gunners were getting a bead on it, and they finally did a direct hit right to the ship, and the ship did one of those, just sunk right in.
So did he have to swim?
He was in the water, which was only 55 degrees that day, for almost 2 hours, and people were drowning around him. And this is at 18 years old. So then if your ship is sunk, you get like a month off and they reassign you. Well, the days were numbered for the Nazis, but the Japanese were still very strong in the Pacific. So there were 4 Allied ships, I believe, that were sunk at D-Day, only 4 or 5. and he was unlucky enough to be on one. They shipped him to San Francisco to get on the USS Shea. So he had been sinking submarines in the Arctic Circle, invading at 18, invading in D-Day, seeing his friends die, trying to rescue people, being MIA for weeks while his mother in Black Rock was just, beside herself, wondering what happened to him in this giant, chaos of D-Day, finding he's alive, then sending him back out again to San Francisco to get on the Shea to go to the Battle of Okinawa.
Wow.
So here is a guy who's, before he's 20, is on the two largest naval battles that will ever occur. We'll never have battles that big again because no one builds that many ships anymore. We were just throwing everything at this effort to stop fascism. So his story is amazing. And all of those guys, they didn't want to talk about it. They were just humble with just doing our thing, trying to keep our country free from dictatorship. And it was amazing. I was shopping with the kids actually in a store one day, and I saw another guy with a destroyer hat on, World War II destroyer. And it turns out his ship was one of the other four that was sunk at D-Day, and he went to the Pacific. So the interesting thing somebody should write about is the handful of men, it's probably less than 1,000, that went from D-Day to Okinawa. And now their story is amazing in the history of warfare because those things will never happen again.
Two different theaters altogether.
Yeah, other sides of the planet.
Wow.
And his ship was hit by a kamikaze, the USS Shea, and should have sunk. It was actually more heavily damaged, I think, than the Cory that did sink. But the way it was hit caused one to sink and one not to. But the Shea hobbled back, and by the time it got to the port of Philadelphia, he was there while the ship was being repaired to go back out again, presumably, and the Japanese surrendered, and the war was over for him. But the stories of him and his friends and his brothers was really telling, and that's why I think Kennedy was so important to us, because he was a naval veteran whose ship was sunk, and he may have been very wealthy, but he was the same as my dad. He was swimming around in shark-infested waters, or whatever.
PT 109.
PT 109, yeah.
So I'm remiss because I didn't introduce everyone to Elias Rosario, our producer. Elias, say hi to
Great
folks.
photographer. Anybody needs a photographer. Oh, my God.
And if you want to talk to Bill about any of the things that he's just talked about, or you want to comment on it, feel free. This is an open forum.
Well, Bill, I know you're at the Discovery Museum. I've been there. I like it.
Oh, great.
The moon food. What's up with the moon food? I know everyone talks about that.
Oh, the astronaut ice
the
cream?
The astronaut food. Yeah, the astronaut ice cream.
Yeah.
What's that made out of? And is that really what they use on the moon?
Yeah, evidently. It's funny. I was in the Science Museum in Glasgow, Scotland. I went to the gift shop. What's your biggest seller? Astronaut ice cream.
Yeah.
But hey, listen, thanks for mentioning Discovery. We have a brand new planetarium. We'd love people to come up. We have grants for fourth grade classes in Bridgeport. Let me just put that out there if there's any fourth grade teachers listening. When we get a kid to come in to that planetarium, we can really help change their life. Because right now with the new system, thanks to the state of Connecticut, we can fly you through the known universe. We can fly you and land you on the moon. And it feels like you're doing it. Fly you through the rings of Saturn. Fly you by Pluto, the dwarf planet. It is a planet. Fly you out of our solar system. Show you the billions of other galaxies like the Milky Way that are out there. And make you feel really, really small. But it's fascinating.
So, Bill, despite how small we are, you decided that it was important to take big steps out of college, and you got involved in politics. What was that all about? Was it a Kennedy thing? Were you one of the Kennedyites?
That the generation that we come from was impossible not to be affected by both the heroism, the courage, the great vision, but then also the tragedy. It was one of those things where you had. You sort of had a super power in your hand, and Darth Vader took it from you. That's how you felt. Kennedy was a huge inspiration to me. And then it got worse, of course, because we supplanted those feelings onto Bobby Kennedy, and then he was taken from us, and King was taken from us, and losing those three people, left holes in your heart that really never get filled. We did fill them a little bit with other people who came later, Obama and Clinton, had idealism and vision. Jimmy Carter had the idealism and the vision. Even George Bush the first, in terms of what he did with strengthening NATO and other things that really made you feel good about an American leader. I certainly don't think there's too many listening today that feel good about the American leader we have now. But if they do, then there's therapy for that.
But we're purposely not going to get into politics.
Right.
But we are going to get into you and your politics. And you decided that you wanted to be, what was your first seat? Council?
I ran for town committee right out of college.
Town committee out of college, okay.
And my friend Laurie Jones, then became Laurie Jones Gibbs. We put together a slate. There were 3 slates. And it was kind of funny because we didn't know what absentee ballots were. We thought they were just for when you went away to college, right? So we worked really hard. It was all women and me.
Really?
And because women do the work in politics. Yeah. People need to understand they're the ones who do
They're
the
hard workers.
Yeah. We had a slate, and election day we won on the machines. And Laurie and I walked into City Hall. We thought we were all that, we won. And there comes this guy, John McCarthy, who's district leader, and he had a brown accordion valise under his arm that was stuffed with papers. We didn't realize it was 200, copies of 200 absentee ballot applications that people had filled out that he bird dogged, that he would call them and make sure you get that in. You need a stamp, and they would get. And all of a sudden, we went from winning on the machines to losing by 100 votes.
So you learned your lesson.
I went right over and joined the town committee and asked to be on it, and I ended up being on their town committee eventually with Joe Lugo.
Quickly,
remember Joe Lugo?
Of course, the first Puerto
Rican. Puerto Rican.
Yeah, in the state assembly. What was tell us about your, quickly and abbreviated, what was your trajectory? You went from what to what to what to what?
Well, I was committeeman and district leader in the South End. Then
what year?
That would have been in the 80s. And then I moved to Beardsley Park area and ran for city council and won there. So I was a councilman for 5 terms. And then I was a state senator for 4 terms. And then I was a mayor for 2 terms.
Wow.
Yeah, it was. That's one of the things. You start out as a young Turk and everybody says pay your dues, but you really do learn along the way. You do. And you look back on it, you see there is a real value to try and, I don't want to call it pay your dues, but really to improve yourself and start with something initially that may be a little bit more attainable and a little bit give you the opportunities to grow into things with more responsibility.
And then New York. How did New York enter into the picture?
I really don't have any idea. I mean, I was minding my own business. I was working for Paul Antonazzi. We were creating a sustainability practice to try to give consulting services to towns to do the sustainability work we did in Bridgeport and other places. It was going pretty well. And a friend of mine through the U.S. Conference of Mayors worked with Governor Cuomo, and he likes to hire mayors to do jobs. So they asked me if I would like to come and run the New York State Thruway Authority. I'm not a big car person. I'm more of a transit person. And I told them that, and they said, but you get to build the new Tappan Zee Bridge, the Mario Cuomo Bridge. And it was a $4 billion project. It was a transformative project, and I can explain that if you're interested. But the way they financed it and built it, everyone said it was going to take 8 years and $8 billion. We did it in 4 years and $4 billion. And it was a thrill to be part of that. It was almost like, you're working on the space program or something, because the technology that's involved, the engineering, the science, it was fascinating. The biology, we were working with the people that preserve the sturgeons and the marshes. We were taking the old bridge out and we were making it part of the offshore storm breaker. It was put
It goes
underwater.
Back underwater?
Yeah, to make fish habitat and to slow the storm surge down during hurricanes. So it was a great project. Jamie Barbas is the woman who's in charge of the project. It was great to work with someone like her who's internationally known, and just this esprit de corps, and it was just a marvelous experience. And then they moved me over to the Rockefeller Institute, where I was working with mayors on climate change. And then this opened up, and I was really excited to get back and work. I've taken all my kids to that museum so many times. I think I have a worn-out path in there.
So now you're very involved with the Discovery Museum, obviously as the executive director, and you're involved with, as you just alluded to, the Rockefeller Institute. Tell me about both of them, if you wouldn't mind,
Well,
and how they fit together into your life.
what I did for a year, really, I'm probably not really affiliated with Rockefeller anymore, but they used my the experience that I learned here in Bridgeport in climate to work with other mayors, and they kept me on as unpaid consultant, just somebody that people could reach out to. But in terms of the Discovery Museum, it's an amazing place. Everything is hands-on. Sometimes the happiest people that come to the Discovery Museum are the science teachers, because you blow things up, you break things, you blast things off. You can't do that in a classroom. We do that. We have the ropes course behind us, the zip lines, the adventure course, the adventure park at the Discovery. They're our partner. We have the Discovery Magnet next door. Those were both things that I didn't know I was going to benefit from when I pushed them through as mayor. But we did push both of those through. We had some opposition, as you always do, but we got around that. We got through that, and we got the things built.
There's a house back in there. What happened to the house? The Brooks.
Oh, I need a
the
rich
Brooks
person.
home.
I need a rich person to help
Now,
me.
I used to live across the street from that on Pembroke Street in
Yeah.
Bridgeport.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah. So what happened?
Well,
What is that house
Mayor
doing?
Mandanisi moved that there in the 70s.
So what is the house? Explain to the people what the house
Well, the
is.
Captain's Brooks house is one of the oldest houses in the city. It was where the Bass Pro Store is, essentially
Right.
on the other side
Correct.
of Stratford Avenue. And California, Pembroke, all those streets down there that were really an incredible old village. Unfortunately, over time, it was all destroyed. But they saved this one house and they moved it up to the Discovery Museum, where it was sort of an open colonial exhibit. And I don't know at what point, but it really became run down. People weren't maintaining it. So now it needs a lot of work. It's definitely worth saving. But we're open to ideas, and we're certainly open to people who have the pockets that can
It's
help
still
us.
in the same location.
It is, and I think it could be part of the adventure park, and it could be also some life sciences, natural sciences exhibit space. But it is set up like Captain Brooks would have had it in the day. And he died of smallpox, I believe, during the American Revolution, which was a pretty common occurrence.
Bridgeport has an incredible history, doesn't it?
yeah.
What were you most fascinated by as far as Bridgeport is concerned?
Wow, where do you start? Well, the Barnum Museum, is a wonderful place. But, I think the thing, I love all the architecture. I restored the David Perry house down on Lafayette Street, which is still there. It's the last house right by the railroad tracks. It's still hanging on. I think Evadne Collins still owns it.
Now, my sister-in-law used to be your child's
Neighbor.
babysitter, right?
Yeah,
Neighbor.
Dulce. We're dear friends. I had the pleasure of appointing her to the Housing Authority. She was doing penance.
You owe her one.
Yeah, I do. Oh, my goodness, that's a tough job. It's like being on the Board of Ed or the City Council. Those
Yep.
are all tough jobs. But the thing that fascinates, I think, the most is if you go to St. Mary's and you go at low tide, you can see the outline of a fort. The stone, there's a sign there that explains it, and the stone foundation stones are still there.
Where do you have to stand to see that?
If you're at the Black Rock Yacht Club, you go about a third of the way toward Fairfield, and it's on your left at a little rise. There's a birdhouse. I think it's a bluebird house or something, and then there is a stand that explains it.
Oh, okay. There is something there.
Think about the impact that fort had. So the British are going to, in 1812, they're going to invade Fairfield. They're going to burn houses. Now, you know the story that many of the houses that were loyalists still to the crown marked their house with a symbol and didn't get burned. So the houses that didn't get burned were probably owned by traitors. So
Right.
don't brag about your history too much, right? But so the reason they didn't invade in Ash Creek area was because that fort was there. But they did invade in Fairfield and marched to Danbury, burning houses. So you just never know what's going to happen with history. We talk about a lot of quantum mechanics and quantum physics in science, and everything is random, and the movement of electrons is random. Everything's random. Time they say is random. All kinds of things are random. History sometimes can have these random little flukes in there that really make you stop and think. Like thank God that fort was there.
Right.
It really saved all of this area from being invaded.
I wonder
And it's still there.
if we're not
Still
getting
there.
our fair share, especially with Gustave Whitehead. It seems like Bridgeport gets the short end of that stick in terms of flight.
It certainly does. We have Andy Koch built a replica. It's a half-scale replica. It's still hanging in the lobby of the Discovery Museum. We don't try to tell people what to think. We just present facts. There are a lot of facts that support that Gustave Whitehead did fly 2 years before. There are a lot of people that don't want to see that challenged because they like the status quo. I wasn't there. I can't prove it either way. But people should be aware of the alternative facts that do exist. There were 32 affidavits signed, including a police officer and a funeral director, respectable people in the community that said they saw him take off and fly for 30 minutes from a dead stop. He didn't glide down a sand dune into the wind to create lift. He created lift on wheels, taking off from a field on a dead start, changing the pitch and the camber of his wings with the wires going to the wings, changed the shape of the wings. I mean, he has a number of firsts, and if you look at Jane's All the World Almanac of Aviation, they claim he did fly first. So we have it there as a testimony to an immigrant who had no political clout, unlike the Wright brothers, who had a very powerful father. We think that the immigrant who was poor, who took his wife's own wedding dress to make the wings, and the women of the family are still angry at him for that. I thought that was pretty funny when they came here. It's like, wait, maybe he invented flight. Yeah, but he took grandma's wedding dress. He didn't need to do that. Yeah, but he invented flight.
I didn't know that. I did not know that part of the story.
Oh yeah, and they were at the Discovery Museum when I was mayor. We had a big function, and we invited the family back. And I thought I was going to score some points and say, well, yeah, but he invented flight with that. That wedding dress was important. No, that should have been ours. We should have.
So where does Bill Finch go from here? I know you're going to remain as executive director.
I got a peanut butter and jelly sandwich waiting for me.
You love this, like a perfect place for you.
I like it,
and that you want to take it. Tell us where you want to take the Discovery Museum.
The Discovery Museum is first off, it's exciting and beneficial just the way it is, but it can grow and we can reach even more children. We test to the test now in education, so that's changed the way our schools are really teaching. And I think it's de-emphasized two things I care deeply about, which are science and history. Science is a lot of where you want to go, and history is where you've been and informing the future and science. So those two things have always been very important to me. And I don't know the solution, but I do know the longer we're there and the stronger we get, the more kids we reach, the more families we reach. We're not just the Child's Museum, although our sweet spot really is 4th, 5th, to 6th, and 7th grade. And again, you can blow things up and break things and come to a planetarium and fly through space. It's all pretty cool. But I think the challenges going forward, guys, is that there are really only two issues moving forward that I see. If you sort of put nuclear arms off to the side, since we seem to have put a bottle in that pretty well, the two issues going forward are climate and technology. There's really nothing else that matters. I mean, I see some of the legislative agendas coming out, and they're talking about important things like bail reform and all that. But, those all really need to come to the back burner compared to climate and technology, because technology is moving very, very rapidly, much faster than our laws, and it needs to change in order to help us respond to climate. Here's an interesting fact I tell people. It's very shocking, and it should wake us all up. Since Al Gore's book came out around 2000, we have put more greenhouse gases in the atmosphere than all of humanity before the book came out. Wow. So since we've been alerted, since we know that we're cooking the climate, cooking the planet, creating climate change, since we've known that, almost universally within the scientific community, there's a few people that are paid by the Koch brothers, but those people are not really taken seriously. Since we've all been alerted, we've done more damage in that short period of time. There's a graph that's very telling. It's called the hockey stick graph, or the Great Accelerator. If you plot the 400,000 years of human history, roughly, or human existence, you see population going at a very flat line along the axis until you and I are born. Okay? In our 80 years or 90 years, the world population is going to triple. 400 and some odd thousand.
Yeah, I remember it was like 3 billion when we were born, or 2.8.
Right, and it will be 9 by the time we pass away. So The planet can't handle that amount of greenhouse gases that all parallel human population, loss of topsoil, acidification of the ocean, loss of biodiversity. All of those travel along that great accelerator that travels along the same path as human population growth. So I don't know all the answers, but I do know.
Yeah, don't leave us depressed.
Well, we've got to focus on it, right? And I think if you look at Climate of Hope that Mike Bloomberg and Carl Pope published a couple of years ago, 2 years ago now, they talk about how addressing the climate issue will create millions of jobs and billions of dollars in investment and billions of dollars of profit. I tangled with somebody recently. They said, well, that's just those billionaires are going to make more money. I hope we create a lot more new wealthy people by fighting climate change.
Right.
That would mean
that'd be a great solution.
Yeah.
I love that, Bill. I just want to ask one more question in reference to politics, and that is how awful it must have felt for you to lose your last race as mayor, and do you have any aspirations?
I've got one more question after.
Okay,
after
good.
you answer.
Well, yeah, it felt terrible, and there's still days it feels terrible because we had it wasn't just me, but we had so many aspirational good leaders in my administration that took Be Green 2020, and during the recession, it was really a depression. We created $1 billion of investment in one of the most forlorn cities.
And I know you did an eco technology park here in the west side.
And 1,000 units of housing and solar on the landfill and the largest fuel cell in North America still today. So we did all those things, and I don't feel like they were repudiated, but I don't think they were valued enough, right? And it disappoints me that I didn't convey the value of those things enough. I tried, but obviously, I didn't succeed. But the saving grace, of course, is that all of those people that were part of that team went on to do even bigger things. And all of those things that we did, the schools and the renewable energy and the stormwater diversion project, I mean, just go on and on, I'd bore you to death. Mm-hmm. Those things are, for the most part, still there. There doesn't seem to be enough support for Joe Gresco and his efforts to be Green Bridgeport, and I would love to see more resources put to that. Remember, the Be Green 2020 plan was a plan from the community. I believe you were at some of those meetings. Sure. We had 150 volunteers who put that plan together. I'm not a big planner, but the plan really generated that community buy-in and that community knowledge base that I think really propelled it. It was, next to Plan YC that Mike Bloomberg did, it was the best in the country that I saw, not just because of me. I opened the door to do it and pushed it, but it was all those volunteers. It was all the great members of the team, Adam Wood and Andy Nunn and George Garcia, Lamont Daniels, Tyrone McLean, Ruben Felipe, Chris Rosario, all these people I'm talking about, Dulce, right? I still owe her one. They were all part of something bigger than themselves. And I think, the older we get, the more we realize you always feel best when you're part of something bigger than yourself.
That's true. You had a question?
Yeah, I had a question. It goes back to the Discovery Museum. We follow each other on Instagram. And
you are a great photographer.
Thank you. One of the things.
Frank's taught you well.
I wish I could take credit for that. I just know good talent.
He has a natural eye.
I know good talent.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now, let me segue that for a second. Now, one of the things that I would like to photograph would be the Earth. But there seems to be this debate about whether it's flat or not.
Well, they say if it was flat, the cats would have been knocking something off of it by now.
So I just want to know what people are there ever people that come to the Discovery Museum and challenge you or challenge anyone there?
It's funny. I think you might have seen my picture. Somebody.
I've seen something about you talking about the flat Earth.
They left a card here. Well, obviously they're.
It was in the bathroom where it belonged. Yeah, that's right. What you said. Yeah.
I mean, I think look, we're at a point now where, one of the gratifications of being at the Science Museum is that we can fight for science. One of the things that always gets me is people say, "Well, you can't prove evolution." Well, you can't prove that this table is made of wood either, beyond a reasonable. There's always a 0.00001% that it may be something different, right? I should be able to put your hand up against mine. I should be able to go through you, because almost all the atoms in my hand are mostly space, but there's an electrical charge that's repelling those materials from going through each other. Anyway, I only use that to demonstrate that science is real, science is factual, and science is always evolving and always challenging itself. One of the problems that we have with climate is that the scientists are very conservative. All of their predictions, unfortunately, have been superseded by the actual occurrence of temperature rise. Part of that's because so much is already baked in, and there are things that create more things from those occurrences. They sort of accelerate. But the point I'm trying to make is that we're fighting for science. And in our lifetime, when we were kids, anybody who said the earth is flat was a clown, and you laugh them out because it's not flat. It's a sphere, and we can prove that. We've left it, we've looked back on it, we've measured it, and it's been known to be a sphere since Galileo, I guess, right? So, and he got into trouble for that, saying that the earth was a sphere and it wasn't in the center of the universe, and it was the sun. We've gotten to a point now, I think, with the internet where a lot of falsehoods can get out there, and you need a science museum now more than ever, because you need to bring people back to, okay, this is a glass, your name is Frank, it's all things we know. We're not going to debate things we know, but we'll always have room for doubt. So if there was actual science that said the world is flat, then we'd investigate it, but there's absolutely no science to back it up, so we don't investigate
Well,
that.
the world is flat is like saying, the climate isn't changing.
Right. Well, you see all these esoteric arguments. We're not a democracy, we're a republic. No, we're a democracy. Stop, we're a democracy. But, people want to create these arguments and these false equivalencies so that people can get confused from what's real. And again, you get back to, why do you have a history museum? Why do you have a science museum? Because you can put those stakes in the ground and say, okay, we're not retreating from this. We've already explored this. We've argued this 250, 300, 400 years ago. We already know this. Stop distracting us from advancing humanity forward. Because you can't argue those things which we know. Always keep an open mind that there may be additional pieces of information. Like, for example, it isn't a perfect sphere. We know it's not a perfect sphere. It's a little fatter at the equator. We know why. All that sort of stuff, right? But you got to move forward from that. And yeah, they did leave little cards laying around the museum that the world was flat with their website on it. So
they must have not enjoyed the exhibit on the second floor with the globe.
No, I don't
with
think
the hologram. They must have not enjoyed that part of the museum.
So, Bill, it's been wonderful having you.
But we want them to come.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Anybody who pays their admission, we don't care what they think.
Just come and check it out.
Yeah.
Bill, Bridgeport is richer for characters like you and I and Elias and other people who enrich in this community. So thank you for being a neighbor, thank you for being a friend, and thank you for your contribution to where we're at. And I wish we could say more about our community, and maybe we will. Maybe we'll just keep fighting.
Well, I'm not here to butter you up, but let me just for a minute. I always remarked at your courage at taking on this property that you're in and building a business. I never thought you were going to succeed. Yeah, I thought you were a little starry-eyed. Yeah. You've done it. You've built it. The home is beautiful. The business is great. You're hiring young people. You got a Fairfield stag right here who's going to go off to do big things.
Yep.
And that's, somebody just left the museum the other day to go on to a bigger and better job, and we're going to miss her, Erica Eng. She left her mark. You left your mark. I left my mark, and that's all you can ask anybody to do. Do your best. Remember who was the priest that ran Colby?
Which one? Father Martin, Father Larry, Father George.
To begin with a W.
Oh yeah, he was after me. I don't know his name, but
his motto that he started, I think, was
Wall something.
Work hard and be nice.
Yes,
that's my Twitter motto. Like, what else? Just work hard and be nice.
That's it,
right? And buy a house in the West End and raise property values.
And believe that things are going to get better here.
You have to.
You have to keep believing it. All right. So thank you, Bill. Thank you, Elias. This has been wonderful. I'm looking forward to seeing what's next for yourself, Bill, and your family.
Right, to check out to the museum.
Tell Peter I said hello. Yes, people can donate to the museum.
Absolutely.
Or come see you, because I know you love giving tours.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, come by.
Yeah, ask for Bill. All right. Thanks, Bill. It's been great. Bridgeport Stories.